Will Nine really offload ACP as total sales for all magazine publishers take a dive? And we'll be speaking to Foxtel's Director of Sport, Peter Campbell, about the launch this week of the new AFL channel, Fox Footy. But first, to the latest newspaper circulation figures, which showed overall print sales down 4% in the December quarter year on year. But the Newspaper Work says that doesn't paint a complete picture of newspaper consumption, with more customers turning to digital platforms. Well, according to the Audit Bureau of Circulations, the Australian saw a rise in sales for both its weekday and weekend editions, while the Australian Financial Review posted a rise in sales for its weekend edition only, the biggest increase for any paper this circulation period. The Daily Telegraph sales were down nearly 2% on weekdays, flat on Saturday, while rival Sydney Morning Herald did it tough this survey period. The Age and the Herald Sun also posted sales declines for both weekday and Saturday editions. And looking at the Sunday papers, the Sunday Telegraph remains the biggest selling newspaper in the country, while the rest of the top selling Sunday papers posted sales drops of between 3 and 8%. Our co-host James Manning, the editor and publisher of Mediaweek, joins us now, this week from Melbourne. James, good to see you there. What's your take on these latest newspaper sales?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of good news there. The standout figures you sort of summarised there, particularly for the Australian, which did very well on both weekdays and on weekends, so that's great news for them. Daily Telegraph had good figures on weekends, but across down the road at Fairfax in Sydney, it was pretty grim for both the Sydney Morning Herald at both editions.
All right, well, let's get some more on the newspaper sector. We're joined now by Tony Prentice, the Chief Commercial Officer for News Australia Sales. Tony, thank you so much for coming on the program. And firstly, we got the news in January that you were appointed the Chief Commercial Officer of the new News Australia Sales Group. And just tell us a bit about this and when we're going to see it put into place.
Well, the plan is to bring together a new sales force across several of our assets, which will be the newspaper, news inserted magazines and digital products, and to create one integrated sales force, which will all be co-located in our Melbourne and Sydney offices, and that should happen in late March, early April. So I think, in the context of what James was just discussing with newspaper figures and the digital consumption figures, I think it's a really interesting moment for us to step into this space and start looking at less of a product lens of how we actually think about our business and more of an audience-led approach to who's consuming the product. And then each of the product owners still has to consider, are they producing product that people want to pay for and want to consume, while we're talking to customers about if what we're offering them is actually helping them meet their commercial objectives, which really is what I think the main focus for everybody needs to be right now, is the return on investment piece for the advertisers.
Tony, just on those hard copy figures for the moment, the great news for the Australian and the Daily Telegraph on both Saturdays and Sundays. The sort of things they're doing that are attracting readers that perhaps some other publishers might be having trouble with?
I think it's a great question, James, in terms of the fact that I think everybody in publishing has come to the realisation that everything has changed forever, and that the control in terms of the relationship now has moved from the producer of the content to the consumer of the content. And I think now that everybody's acutely aware of that, the shape of what we produce on a daily basis changes, and the consumers give us instant feedback. And I think you see that in the newspaper figures we're discussing right now, and you also see it on the digital ratings that are now in the marketplace as well.
Tony, I just had a question too. Obviously, we've seen that the partial paywall now around the Australian. Have you noticed any impact from that yet?
The impacts are a work in progress in understanding, as you'd imagine, given that we're the first business in this country to go through this. And, it's a wide front we're operating on here in the tablet space, in the subscription space with our web-based product, and trying to integrate that in a single offer. And I think that's sometimes the piece we're missing here, that if you're a consumer of a product like the Australian, our offer to you is actually a through-the-lines offer. So it's actually the newspaper on however many days a week you choose to consume it and have it sent to your door, as well as the web offer and a brand new mobile site offer and a tablet application offer. So when you're looking at learnings, that's a very wide front for us to be trying to understand what's working and what's not. And I'd suggest that our approach is very much one of test and learn, which is something that we've got, as you'd imagine, a large group of people looking at and scrutinising numbers that are real time. We can see now with our own subscription capability who's engaging and who's not engaging with us. So we're in many ways now moving to that subscription mentality of actually saying, well, are the customers enjoying what we're producing and are they willing to pay for it? So the learnings, I think, will go for at least another year before we'd actually come out and say anything conclusive. I'd say, though, our expectations are being met. And as usual with these things, we normally have a bit of an internal a betting scheme in terms of where the numbers are going to end up. And pleasingly, more often than not, we're wrong. And we're wrong on the short side, and the numbers actually outperform what we're thinking is going to happen. So very much a testing environment, and there's lots of dialogue going on, which then gets fed back to the product people in terms of whether or not we're producing things that the consumer seems to have value.
Fairfax has just gone to market with audience measurement data, which sort of wraps all the eyeballs, whether it be the hard copy, the web, the tablet or the mobile editions. Do you sort of transmit that sort of data to your advertisers?
I think the measurement question's it's a great question moving forward for all of us now. And the new space for measurement is about converged measurement, because to be able to only talk to one set of numbers in isolation to an advertiser doesn't really complete their requirements at their end, nor does it paint a really accurate picture of where we're at with what we're doing. So I think what Fairfax has done is really commendable in terms of putting a marker out there and suggesting, look, here's a lens to look at our audiences, and if you look at them in total, what you're seeing is a story that's talking about growth, which is really what all the media vendors will want to talk about, is growth. So we'll all have a view on how to construct that story. And there's no doubt that when you start adding all the different channels together across these product platforms, they do end up with very compelling numbers that the advertisers want to listen to. But I don't think they're in isolation. I think converged media measurement is probably something we'll all be consumed with probably for the next 3 to 5 years. And it's certainly not a publisher-centric problem. It's not only about newspaper and digital readership. It's going to be broader than that. And I'm assured that the people at OzTam and inside the IAB and the newspaper works will all be talking and thinking about how we actually converge and make sense of all the different measurement currencies.
We had some predictions about online spending growth, and the Interactive Advertising Bureau predicting that online advertising will pass TV and newspapers to become the biggest ad sector within 18 months. Is that something you see happening that quickly?
Look, the rate of growth is still amazing when you actually look at what's going on in the space across search and across display and across classifieds. It continues to march ahead, and there's no reason to suggest that those numbers are wrong. I think the timing could be questioned, but the outcome, I think, is already preordained, and this will happen. I think the interesting piece is, once again, making sense of that and what does that mean, because the advertisers aren't finding more money. They're having to figure out where they're going to stop spending. So I think it all gets back to this efficacy question of, if they invest and they can see the return, they continue to spend. And there's no doubt in the digital world that what they're seeing there is easily trackable and measurable. The real question is for digital moving forward is, how does it actually move itself to the next level in terms of creativity, innovation? And I think we're challenged in some ways by it's so heavily accountable in terms of a click economy, but a click economy is only the front door of a house of many rooms in terms of getting a result for an advertiser. So where it goes from here in terms of the merging of intelligence and imagination in the digital space, I think there's so much left in that, that I'd see these growth figures continuing for the next few years.
Tony, advertisers we have on the show talk about the attraction of print advertising. It can give you a sort of a big bang very quickly. Big display ads can have a big impact on the audience. It seems to be there's a bit of a challenge getting that sort of same hit with online offerings that don't interrupt the sort of experience of reading online.
Yeah, I think the creative impact in the digital space is still nascent, and I think there's we've probably all been so busy in terms of speaking to customers just about transactions for the last 5 years that I think universally the key publishers would all think there's work to be done in the creative and ad space. So I would stay tuned for probably the next 2 years of pretty sophisticated, high-impact new ad units that engage with consumers in high-impact ways, as well as being able to get that mass reach that's been prevalent in analogue analogue media businesses for many years.
Just looking to, I mean, in terms of attracting revenues for your digital audience, is it hard to get the same sort of revenues as it is for your traditional newspaper audience?
Yeah. Everybody talks about yields and the transferring of yields from print businesses into digital businesses, and I think it's a valid question, and it's a difficult question for publishers. And you know, the cost to produce quality premium content in the online environment is high. The technology required to support that is high. So I think part of the answer to the last question about creativity and impact helps grow yields. Messages that cut through are worth paying more for. I think it's been a long-held tenet for advertisers that they pay for both reaching audiences, but for how long can I hold their attention. So the challenge in the pure digital sense is in that creative engagement space. But you know, the other side is, I think if you look in the tablet environment and the application space, the time spent in the product is maybe 5 times a user session duration to the web product on a PC environment, and what we can do with creative in HTML5 is light years from what we're probably doing in the PC space. So I think the future's very bright with that, and you'll find a big shift and focus on creativity over the next couple of years.
Okay.
Tony, you've competed against newspapers in a couple of different media sectors over the years for ad dollars. Now you're sort of a newspaper warrior. Is this going to be your biggest challenge?
I haven't been called a newspaper warrior yet. But look, I probably am, and I think one of the key learnings from having worked in several media is that the more you only talk about your product, the more open you are to being depositioned or being less relevant. And I think the key to News's success is actually going to be to take more of a single view of what we're offering here with newspapers. Is this well-known, very trusted, performance environment where we know what happens and customers are very comfortable with. I think the merging of that into the emerging space with our digital assets really is my job. I don't think I'm the newspaper warrior. I think I'm the news limited audience warrior. And really what I want to be is someone who can stand very comfortably in front of customers saying that if you invest, that we'll give you a return on that investment. So I think you'll see a shift in our language, more about audiences, less about products, and you're certainly going to see us front and centre with return on that investment as we continue to have fantastic relationships with the top advertisers in Australia.
Tony, it's been great to have you on the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.